Your chest tightens, your breathing becomes shallow, and suddenly you are completely paralyzed by a catastrophic scenario that hasn't even happened. Why does your perfect biology and your magnetic field short-circuit because of a ghost with no physical mass? The great truth that will change your reality today is this. What if the wall stopping you from moving forward isn't real, but simply a signal interference you were trained to tune into? Right now your body is reacting to something that exists only as a projection, a phantom frequency, repeating patterns you didn't choose but learned to believe. It feels urgent, it feels real, but look closer. Nothing is actually blocking you in this moment. What you're sensing is not danger, it's distortion. And the moment you begin to question it instead of obey it, something starts to break. Not you, the pattern. The signal loses strength, the pressure shifts, because what felt solid was never structure, only repetition. And repetition can stop the second you see it clearly. You know that horrible feeling of being about to take an important step, and out of nowhere a heavy anchor pulls you back to square one. This is not self-sabotage or weakness. In quantum physics, your central nervous system is simply responding to a dense vibration around you, absorbing external information like a misaligned antenna. What you feel in that moment is real in your body, but the source is often misunderstood. Your system is designed to read subtle signals all the time: tone of voice, facial expressions, past memories, imagined futures. It doesn't just process what is physically in front of you. It also reacts to what it believes might happen, and when those signals get distorted, your entire internal field begins to shift as if danger were already present. That tightening in your chest, that sudden drop in confidence, that wave of hesitation, it feels personal, like something inside you is broken or holding you back. But look closer. Your body isn't betraying you. It's over-responding to input that hasn't been questioned. It's like a radio picking up static and interpreting it as a clear message. And here's where the illusion begins to take shape. Because once your body reacts, your mind rushes in to explain it. It starts building a story. Something is wrong. This is a bad idea. You're not ready. These thoughts don't come from clarity. They come from the sensation that was triggered first. The signal comes before the meaning, but we live as if the meaning were truth. Over time, this loop becomes automatic. A sensation appears. Your mind labels it as danger and your behavior follows. You step back, you delay, you shrink your next move. Not because reality demanded it, but because your internal field was hijacked by noise that felt convincing. Think about how sensitive your system really is. You can walk into a room and instantly feel tension without anyone saying a word. You can sense when someone is off, even if they're smiling. Now imagine that same sensitivity turned inward, picking up fragments of memory, doubt, and imagined outcomes, blending them into a single signal your body treats as urgent. The problem is not that you are too sensitive. The problem is that you were never taught how to filter. So instead of recognizing interference, you identify with it. You call it your fear, your limitation, your personality. But much of what you carry in those moments doesn't belong to your present reality. It's residue, old data, borrowed expectations, and when it floods your system, it creates the perfect conditions for the illusion to feel solid. Notice how fast it happens. One moment you are clear, even excited. The next, your energy drops, your thoughts tighten, and your vision narrows. Nothing outside has changed yet. No real consequence has occurred. But internally, it feels like everything has already collapsed. That's the hijack. Your field shifts before your logic can catch up. And once it shifts, your perception reorganizes to match it. You start seeing obstacles more clearly than opportunities. You remember past failures more vividly than past successes. You begin to prepare for impact instead of movement. And the more this repeats, the more convincing it becomes. Not because it's true, but because it's familiar. Familiar signals feel safe, even when they limit you. This is why trying to push through often backfires. When your system is in that contracted state, forcing action without understanding the signal only adds more pressure. It's like trying to drive faster while the steering wheel is being pulled in another direction. So pause for a moment and consider this. What if that heavy anchor you feel is not a warning, but interference? What if your body is reacting to a pattern that was never questioned, only repeated? Because if that's true, then fighting it head-on may not be the solution at all. In fact, the instinct to immediately resist, suppress, or overpower this feeling might be the very thing that keeps the illusion alive and drains even more of your energy. Here is the great danger almost no one tells you about. Every time this anxiety hits, your immediate instinct is to fight it or force a positive thought at any cost. This is the most destructive mistake for your energy. In the mechanics of the universe, where there is friction, there is transfer of mass. By going to war with your mind, you are literally donating vital energy to give life to this illusion. There is a single mechanical command capable of shutting this down instantly. But before I give you that key, you need to close the leak through which your power is draining. Pause and look at what usually happens inside you. The feeling rises, tight chest, restless thoughts, that sense that something is about to go wrong, and almost instantly, another voice appears trying to correct it. Calm down. Think positive. Don't feel this. It sounds helpful, but it creates a split. One part of you is feeling, the other is resisting. And that internal friction is where your energy begins to drain. It's subtle but powerful. The more you try to suppress the sensation, the more attention you give it. And attention is not neutral. It feeds whatever it touches. So even though your intention is to get rid of the discomfort, what you're actually doing is reinforcing it. You're telling your system, this matters, this is important, this needs to be fixed now, and your body responds by amplifying the signal. This is how the illusion gains density. It doesn't grow because it is real. It grows because it is resisted. Every attempt to control it adds another layer of importance, another charge of energy. It's like trying to push water down with your hands. It only creates more movement, more turbulence. And the more turbulent it becomes, the more convincing it feels. You may have noticed this before. The harder you try not to think about something, the more it takes over your mind. The more you try to relax on command, the more tense your body becomes. This is not failure. It's a natural response to internal conflict. Your system doesn't understand force the way your mind imagines it. It understands coherence. It responds to alignment, not pressure. So when you fight the feeling, you're not removing it. You're fragmenting yourself. One part pushes, another resists, and the illusion sits right in the middle, fed by both sides. And here's the part that often goes unnoticed. This constant inner battle becomes exhausting. Not because the original sensation was so strong, but because you've been carrying the weight of resisting it all day. The fatigue you feel is not just from fear, it's from the effort of trying to control what was never meant to be controlled in that way. Now consider something simple but uncomfortable. What if the anxiety itself is not the real problem? What if the real drain comes from your reaction to it? If you remove the fight, even for a moment, something unexpected happens. The intensity begins to shift, not disappear instantly but soften, because without resistance there is nothing holding it in place, no structure feeding it, no friction giving it weight. But most people never reach that point. They are trained to react immediately, to fix, to escape, to override. And in doing so, they stay locked in a loop where the illusion keeps proving itself again and again. You don't break the loop by winning the fight. You break it by stepping out of it. And this is where things start to turn in a direction that may feel counterintuitive at first. Because if fighting doesn't work and suppressing only strengthens the signal, then the question becomes unavoidable. What happens if you stop engaging in the battle altogether? Not giving up, not collapsing, but choosing a completely different position. There is a precise way to do this, something almost mechanical in its simplicity, that interrupts the entire pattern at its root. But before accessing it, there is something even more urgent to see clearly. Because if this internal resistance continues unchecked, it doesn't just stay as a passing moment. It begins to accumulate, to spread, to influence areas of your life you wouldn't immediately connect to this state. And that's where the real cost starts to show up. If you keep ignoring this leak just to survive another day, the law of entropy begins to act drastically. At first, it's just sleepless nights, but soon this frequency of fear starts collapsing your material reality. Opportunities dry up, money gets stuck, doors close without explanation, and your physical body becomes ill from pure cellular exhaustion. What was once just a thought gains mass, and turns into a concrete prison around you. Entropy is a simple idea, but its effect is everywhere. Left unattended, systems move toward disorder. Energy disperses, structure weakens. And this doesn't only apply to physics or machines, it applies to your inner world as well. When your energy is constantly leaking through resistance, tension, and unconscious reaction, your system loses coherence. And when coherence drops, your ability to act clearly begins to fragment. At first, the signs are subtle. You hesitate more than usual. You delay decisions that used to feel simple. You second-guess things that once felt natural. It doesn't feel dramatic, just slightly off. But this is how entropy starts, quietly, almost invisibly. Then it spreads. Your attention becomes scattered. You begin multiple things and finish fewer. Conversations feel heavier. Even small tasks require more effort than they should. And because you're still trying to function normally, you push through it, thinking it's just a phase or lack of motivation. But underneath that surface, something deeper is happening. Your system is spending more energy maintaining internal conflict than engaging with real life. And that imbalance has consequences. The illusion begins to move from your mind into your environment, not in some mystical or exaggerated way, but through very real mechanisms. When your perception is filtered through tension, you interpret neutral situations as negative. When your energy is low, your actions become inconsistent. When your focus is fragmented, your results reflect that fragmentation. You might miss an opportunity simply because you didn't have the clarity to recognize it. You might delay a response that mattered. You might show up with less presence, less confidence, less precision. And over time, these small shifts accumulate. From the outside, it can look like bad luck or external resistance, but if you trace it back, you'll often find the same root, a system running under continuous internal strain. Your body feels it too. Not as a sudden breakdown, but as a gradual wear. Sleep becomes lighter. Your breathing stays shallow even at rest. Muscles remain slightly tense without you noticing. Your nervous system is constantly preparing for something that never fully arrives. This is what prolonged exposure to the illusion does. It convinces your system to stay in a state of alert without resolution. And that state is expensive. It consumes resources, mental, emotional, physical, without producing anything in return. And the longer it continues, the more normal it starts to feel. That's one of the most dangerous parts. You adapt to the disorder. You begin to accept a lower baseline of energy, clarity, and ease. What once felt like a temporary disruption becomes your everyday experience. You stop questioning it. But even then, there are moments, small, almost forgotten moments, when something inside you recognizes that this isn't how it's supposed to be. A brief sense of clarity, a memory of how things felt when your mind was quiet and your energy was aligned. Those moments don't last long, but they're important because they show you that the system hasn't broken. It's just overloaded, and overload can be reversed, but not by pushing harder and not by continuing to ignore the leak. If anything, ignoring it accelerates the process. Entropy doesn't wait. It continues to spread until something interrupts the pattern. And that interruption doesn't come from force. It comes from awareness. There is something else you need to see. Something that shifts the entire weight of this experience almost instantly. Because while it feels like you're carrying all of this alone, that pressure may not even fully belong to you. And once you begin to recognize that, the density you've been fighting starts to loosen in a way that changes everything. I know exactly how exhausting it is to carry this weight all day, feeling like your mind is working against you. But take a deep breath now, because here comes immediate relief. 99% of this crushing load isn't even yours. Your magnetic field is highly sensitive and has connected to the collective grid of survival and despair. Simply becoming aware that you are carrying emotional residue that doesn't belong to you already melts half of the pressure off your shoulders. Think about how much information you are exposed to in a single day. News, conversations, social media, passing comments, silent expectations. Even when you're alone, your mind replays voices, situations, and imagined outcomes. Your system doesn't always distinguish between what is directly happening to you and what you are absorbing from the environment around you. So when that heavy feeling appears, it may not be a personal signal. It may be an echo, An emotional tone that has been circulating long before you noticed it. Fear about money, uncertainty about the future, quiet despair people carry without saying a word. These frequencies move through groups, through families, through entire societies. And if your system is open and perceptive, it can pick them up without permission. That's why sometimes the feeling seems to arrive without a clear cause. Nothing specific happened, no immediate threat is present, yet your body reacts as if something is wrong. The illusion gains strength in these moments because your mind tries to explain a sensation that didn't originate from your own experience. So it creates a story. It searches for something in your life to attach that feeling to. A decision you've been postponing, a risk you've been considering, a memory that still carries emotional weight. And suddenly, what was just a passing signal becomes a personal narrative. This must mean I'm not ready. This must mean something bad is coming. This must be a warning. But what if it isn't? What if your system is simply overloaded with signals that were never filtered? There is a quiet but powerful shift that happens when you consider this. Instead of immediately identifying with the feeling, you begin to question its origin, not in an analytical way, but in a simple, direct way. Is this actually mine? That question alone creates space, and in that space something begins to loosen. The sensation may still be there, but it no longer feels as solid, as personal, as absolute. It becomes something you are noticing, not something you are trapped inside. This is where the illusion starts to crack. Because its strength depends on identification, it needs you to believe that every signal you feel is a direct reflection of your reality. But the moment you see that your system can pick up external noise, the certainty begins to fade. You don't have to carry everything you feel. Your body is responsive, not defective. It's doing its job, scanning, receiving, interpreting, but without awareness it becomes like an open channel with no filter, letting everything in and treating it all as equally important. And that's exhausting. Now imagine what happens when you stop assuming every weight belongs to you. When you allow the possibility that some of it is just passing through, you don't need to push it away. You don't need to fix it. Just recognizing that it may not be yours already reduces the load. You might notice your shoulders drop slightly. Your breathing becomes less restricted. Your thoughts lose a bit of their urgency. Nothing dramatic, but enough to feel a shift. That shift is not coming from changing the external world. It's coming from changing your relationship to what you're perceiving. And this matters more than it seems, because once the pressure decreases, even a little, your system regains some of its natural balance. You're no longer reacting from a place of total overload. There is a bit more room to see clearly. But even with this relief, something else continues to operate in the background. A deeper mechanism that keeps pulling your attention forward, projecting scenarios that haven't happened, creating tension around something that doesn't yet exist. It's subtle, but persistent. Because even if the weight isn't fully yours, the mind still has a way of turning it into a future that feels real enough to fear. And that's where another layer of the illusion begins to reveal itself. Even so, your mind insists on torturing you with the dangers of a dark tomorrow. The hidden problem is that modern physics proves the future has no solid density in the now. This acute panic depends on the illusion of linear time to pulse through your body. You are burning your most precious life fuel to protect yourself from an invisible echo projected onto an empty screen. Look closely at what is actually happening when fear takes over. Your body reacts as if something real is about to occur, but if you pause for a second, nothing is physically threatening you in that moment. You are sitting, standing, breathing. The room around you is stable, yet internally it feels like something urgent is unfolding. That gap between what is real and what is felt is where the illusion operates with precision. Your mind is projecting forward, constructing a possible scenario, and your body is responding as if that projection has already taken form. It doesn't wait for evidence. It doesn't ask if the event is guaranteed. It simply reacts to the image, to the idea, to the suggestion of what might happen. This is how the illusion of linear time traps your system. You've been trained to think of time as a straight line, past behind you, future ahead of you. And within that structure, The future feels like something you are constantly moving toward, something that will eventually arrive whether you're ready or not. So when your mind paints a negative outcome, it feels inevitable, like a destination already set. But in your direct experience, the future never actually arrives. There is only this moment, and then another moment, and another. The tomorrow your mind fears exists only as a mental construction happening now, and still, your body pays the price. Your heart rate increases, your muscles tighten, your breathing shortens. Energy is mobilized to deal with a threat that has no physical presence. You are spending real resources to prepare for something that is not here. This is what makes the illusion so convincing. It uses a real biological response to validate an unreal scenario. Your body says, "This feels serious," and your mind answers, "Then it must be true." But that conclusion is never questioned. Instead, you begin to organize your behavior around it. You avoid risks. You delay action. You wait for a sense of certainty that never fully comes, all because of a future that has no substance outside of your imagination. And the more you rehearse these imagined outcomes, the more familiar they become. They start to feel like memories, even though they haven't happened. Your system doesn't clearly separate imagined repetition from lived experience, so it learns from both. This is why fear can feel so real even when it's based on something that hasn't occurred. You've practiced it. You've run the scenario so many times that your body recognizes it as a pattern. And patterns create expectation. Expectation creates tension, and tension keeps the illusion alive. Now consider how much energy this consumes over time, not just in moments of intense anxiety, but in the background of your day. A constant low-level preparation for something undefined, a subtle contraction in your system that never fully releases. It becomes your baseline. And from that baseline, your decisions are shaped, not by what is actually present, but by what is anticipated. You begin to live slightly ahead of yourself, always leaning into a future that hasn't arrived, trying to solve problems that don't yet exist. But here's the shift that changes everything. If the future has no density in the now, then your reaction to it is optional, not automatic. That doesn't mean you stop planning or thinking ahead. It means you begin to see the difference between practical preparation and emotional projection. One is grounded, the other feeds the illusion. And once you start to see that difference, something unexpected begins to happen. The fear that once felt like a warning starts to look more like a signal, something pointing, not something blocking. Because hidden inside that intensity, there is information. Not about danger, but about direction. And if you stop treating it as an enemy, you might begin to notice that it's been trying to show you something all along. And it is exactly at this point that common sense shatters and the game turns entirely in your favor. Everything you were taught about fear being a warning to retreat is a cosmic lie. In the laws of the universe, this paralyzing fear is not your enemy, it is your quantum compass. The terrifying intensity of what you feel reveals the exact proportion of the evolutionary leap waiting for you. The shadow only appears so massive because there is a colossal light about to be born right behind it. Stay with that idea for a moment. Even if it feels uncomfortable, you've been conditioned to interpret fear as a stop sign, as proof that something is wrong or dangerous. But what if instead it is a marker, not telling you to turn back, but pointing directly at the edge of your current identity? Think about the moments that triggered the strongest reactions in your life, not the small daily worries, but the deep, gripping fear that seemed to take over your entire body. Almost always, those moments were connected to something that mattered, a decision that could change your direction, an opportunity that required you to step beyond what felt familiar, a version of yourself that you had not yet fully embodied. Fear shows up where expansion is possible. But here's where the illusion distorts the signal. Instead of reading that intensity as a sign of importance, your mind translates it as a sign of danger. It confuses unfamiliar with unsafe, and in doing so, it reverses the meaning of the experience. So the very thing that is meant to guide you forward becomes the reason you hold yourself back. Your system is not broken when it reacts strongly. It is highlighting something. The intensity is not random. It carries information. The problem is that most people never learn how to read it correctly. They only learn how to escape it. And every time you escape, you reinforce the idea that the feeling was something to avoid. The illusion becomes stronger, not because it has power, but because its message was misinterpreted again. Now consider a different approach. Instead of asking, "How do I get rid of this fear?" ask, "What is this pointing to?" That simple shift changes your entire relationship with the experience, because when fear is seen as a compass, its presence becomes meaningful. The stronger it feels, the more precise the direction. It doesn't mean the path will be easy. It means the path is significant. You can even observe this in small ways. Notice how little resistance you feel toward things that don't matter to you. There's no tension, no internal conflict, no heavy emotional charge. You can take it or leave it without much thought. But when something truly matters, when it has the potential to change how you live, how you see yourself, or how you show up in the world, that's when the intensity appears. That's when your system activates, not to stop you, but to prepare you. The energy you feel as fear is the same energy required for movement. It's activation, not obstruction. But if you label it as something negative, you block its natural flow. You turn momentum into resistance. This is how the illusion flips the script. It takes a signal designed for growth and disguises it as a threat. And the cost of that misunderstanding is not just missed opportunities. It's a gradual shrinking of your life. You begin to stay within what feels manageable, predictable, controlled. Not because that's what you truly want, but because it's what doesn't trigger that intense reaction. Over time, your world becomes smaller, quieter, safer, and less alive. But the signal never fully disappears. It keeps returning in different forms, pointing to the same direction, asking the same question in new ways. Each time you feel that contraction, that pull, that sudden wave of intensity, it's another chance to read it differently. Not as a wall, but as an arrow. And once you begin to see it this way, something shifts internally. The fear may still arise, but it no longer carries the same meaning. It becomes information rather than a command. And when that happens, you're no longer forced to react automatically. There is a gap, a small but powerful space between the sensation and your response. Inside that space lies a completely different way of engaging with the illusion. Because if fear is not something to fight and not something to obey, then the question becomes very clear. What happens when you simply observe it? Remember that fatal mistake of trying to fight the anxiety I warned you about at the beginning. The definitive way out is not war, it is absolute neutrality. The observer effect proves that the wave of probability changes when it is simply observed. When the shadow arrives tonight, do not fight, do not run, and do not try to distract yourself. Just observe the raw emotion in your chest without judgment. The moment you remove emotional resistance, the illusion loses its support, and the hologram collapses within seconds. This may sound too simple, almost suspiciously so. You've been taught that intense feelings require equally intense solutions, that something so overwhelming must be controlled, fixed, or eliminated. But what if the very act of trying to control it is what keeps it alive? Observation is different. It doesn't try to change the experience. It doesn't label it as good or bad. It doesn't rush to conclusions. It simply allows the sensation to be seen as it is, without interference. And that changes everything. Because the illusion depends on your reaction, it needs your resistance, your urgency, your belief that something must be done immediately. When you remove that reaction, you remove its fuel source. The sensation may still appear, but it has nothing to attach to. No story, no struggle, no reinforcement, no. At first, this can feel uncomfortable. Your mind will try to pull you back into the old pattern. It will say, do something. Fix this. Don't just sit here. That voice is part of the habit. It's the system trying to return to what feels familiar. But if you stay with the observation, something subtle begins to happen. Instead of the feeling expanding, it starts to reveal its structure. You notice that it's not one solid block, but a series of smaller sensations. A tightness here, a pressure there, a rhythm in your breathing. What once felt overwhelming begins to break into pieces, and when it breaks into pieces, it becomes manageable. Not because you forced it to change, but because you stopped treating it as something larger than it is. The illusion thrives on exaggeration. It presents itself as total, absolute, all-consuming. But under observation, it loses that effect. You begin to see it for what it actually is, a temporary pattern moving through your system. There is also a shift in time. When you are caught in the reaction, everything feels urgent, like it must be resolved now. But when you observe, time slows down. The pressure decreases. You are no longer racing against an imagined outcome. You are simply present with what is happening. And in that presence, your body starts to recalibrate. Your breathing deepens naturally. Your muscles begin to release, not because you told them to, but because the signal of danger is no longer being reinforced. This is the disarmament. No force, no struggle, no conflict. Just the absence of resistance. And here's something important to notice. You're not getting rid of the feeling. You are allowing it to complete its cycle. Every sensation that arises in your body has a natural beginning, middle, and end. But when you resist it, you interrupt that process. You stretch it out, sometimes for hours, even days. Observation lets it finish. It's like watching a wave instead of trying to stop it. The wave rises, peaks, and falls on its own. Your job is not to control the ocean, but to stop fighting the movement. The illusion cannot survive in that environment. Without your reaction, it has no continuity. It appears, it moves, and it dissolves. And in that dissolution, something else becomes available. The energy that was tied up in resistance begins to return. Not all at once, but noticeably. You feel a slight opening, a bit more space inside your chest, a quiet clarity that wasn't there before. It's not dramatic, but it's real. And the more you practice this, the more familiar that state becomes. You start to trust that you don't need to react immediately, that you can stay present even when intensity arises, that the illusion is not something you have to solve, but something you can witness. This changes how you move, because now instead of being controlled by the signal, you are in relationship with it. You can feel it without being pulled by it. You can notice it without believing it. And in that shift, something important begins to return to you, something that was always there but hidden beneath the noise and the reaction, your energy. And once that energy is no longer being drained by constant resistance, it doesn't just disappear into the background. It becomes available again, ready to move, to act, to create in a completely different way. In the exact millisecond you stop resisting and simply observe, a physical and biological shift happens. All that overwhelming energy you were using to hold the door against your invisible monsters is fully returned to your heart center. The relief is instant. You feel your chest open, your breath flows, and an unshakable clarity takes over who you are. It's almost surprising how fast it happens. One moment you are tense, contracted, caught in a loop. The next, something releases. Not because the situation outside has changed, but because the internal struggle has stopped. The energy that was locked in opposition becomes available again. You can feel it in very real ways. Your breathing deepens without effort. Your shoulders drop. Your thoughts slow down, not forced, just naturally quieter. There is space where there was pressure, and in that space, you begin to see more clearly. This is your natural state returning. Not something new, not something you have to build, but something that was always there beneath the noise. The illusion made it seem like you were blocked, limited, or stuck. But what was really happening is that your energy was being redirected into resistance. Once that resistance is gone, your system reorganizes quickly. Clarity is not created, it is revealed. And with that clarity comes a different kind of awareness. You start to notice how much effort you were using to manage something that didn't need management. How much tension you carried for scenarios that never actually unfolded. How much of your day was shaped by reactions instead of choices. There is no judgment in this realization, just a quiet understanding. You see it, and in seeing it, you are no longer inside it. This is where your power begins to feel real again. Not as control over everything, but as a steady presence within yourself. A sense that you can face what arises without immediately losing balance. That you don't have to rush, fix, or escape. That you can stay. And when you stay, something else becomes possible. The same energy that once fueled anxiety now becomes available for movement. Decisions feel lighter, actions feel more direct. You are no longer pushing against an invisible force, you are moving with what is in front of you. It's a subtle shift, but it changes the quality of everything you do. Even small actions carry a different weight. Sending a message, making a call, starting something you've been postponing. It all feels less complicated, not because the actions themselves changed, but because the internal resistance is no longer amplifying them. The illusion used to turn simple steps into overwhelming challenges. Now, without that distortion, things return to their actual size, manageable, clear, possible. You may also notice something interesting in your body, a sense of warmth or expansion in your chest, a feeling of being more grounded, more present. This is not imagination. It's your nervous system shifting out of a defensive state and into a balanced one. Your system is designed to do this. It knows how to regulate itself when it's not being interrupted by constant resistance. And the more you allow this process, the more stable it becomes. You start to trust that you don't need to react immediately, that you can let a sensation rise and fall without losing yourself in it, that your power is not in controlling the experience, but in staying present with it. This changes how you relate to challenges. Instead of seeing them as threats that drain you, you begin to see them as situations you can meet with clarity. The energy is no longer consumed before you even act. It is available when you need it, and that availability creates momentum, because now, when you move with your full system behind you. Not fragmented, not divided, not pulled in different directions. There is a sense of alignment that wasn't there before, and from that alignment, something naturally begins to form, a kind of open space within you, not empty in a negative way, but clear, free from the constant noise that used to fill it, free from the tension that used to define it. And nature has a very specific response to that kind of space. It doesn't leave it untouched. With this false density evaporated from your path, the cosmos detects a clean and open space in your field, and because the universe abhors a vacuum, it rushes to fill it with higher frequency. Without the static of fear blocking your original signal, you become a natural magnet. The synchronicities you once forced and begged for begin to be drawn to you effortlessly. What changed was not the world outside you. It was the signal you were sending without even trying. Before, your system was crowded. Tension, anticipation, resistance, these created noise, and that noise distorted everything. It was like trying to send a clear message through a broken transmitter. The intention might have been there, but the output was scattered. Now, with that internal pressure released, something becomes clear. Your presence itself starts to carry coherence. You are no longer divided inside, and that unity reflects outward in ways that are subtle but undeniable. People respond differently to you. Conversations feel smoother. Timing begins to align in ways that seem almost too precise to be random. You think of something, and the opportunity appears. You hesitate less, and because of that, you act at the exact moment something opens. This is not about magic. It's about alignment. When your internal state is no longer consumed by the illusion, your perception sharpens. You notice what was always there, but previously hidden behind noise. You recognize patterns faster. You make connections without overthinking them. What once felt like coincidence begins to look like natural flow. And flow has a very different quality than force. Force is heavy. It requires constant effort, constant correction, constant pushing against resistance. Flow is efficient. It moves with less friction because it is not fighting itself. When you are in that state, your actions become more precise, even if they are simple. You send one message instead of 10. You make one clear decision instead of circling the same thought for hours. You say what needs to be said without over-explaining, and these small shifts begin to compound. The illusion used to convince you that everything required struggle, that if something mattered, it had to be difficult, complicated, or uncertain. But now you start to see a different pattern. Things that are aligned don't feel heavy in the same way. They may still require effort, but it's clean effort, not draining. You are no longer wasting energy trying to overcome internal resistance, so that energy becomes available for creation. And creation doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. A new idea forming clearly in your mind. A decision you finally make without second-guessing. A sense of direction that feels steady instead of forced. This is the vacuum being filled, not with random outcomes, but with responses that match the clarity you now hold. Your system is no longer broadcasting confusion, so what returns to you carries a different quality. You might also notice that you stop chasing certain things, not because you gave up, but because the urgency is gone. And strangely, that's when those things begin to move closer. Without the pressure, without the grasping, there is space for them to appear naturally. This is one of the quiet shifts that changes everything. When you stop trying to control every outcome, you become more available to what is actually happening. You respond instead of react. You choose instead of chase. And that changes your relationship with time, with action, with results. The illusion depended on urgency. It needed you to believe that everything had to be solved immediately, that something was always at risk. But in this clearer state, you see that most things unfold step by step, not all at once. You begin to trust timing in a different way, not blindly but through observation. You see how things connect, how one action leads to another, how being present in one moment opens the next. There is less guessing, less forcing, more noticing. And the more you notice, the more precise your actions become. This is how momentum builds without pressure, not from pushing harder, but from removing what was in the way. The path was never blocked. It was just obscured by noise. Now that the noise is gone, movement feels natural again. And as this continues, something deeper begins to settle inside you. A sense that this shift is not temporary, that something fundamental has changed in how you relate to your own mind, your energy, your direction. It starts to feel stable, not because challenges disappear, but because your way of meeting them is different. And from that place, a new threshold begins to approach, one where this is no longer something you practice occasionally, but something that defines how you move forward from here. Tonight, when you turn off the lights and lay your head on the pillow, the story will not repeat. You will no longer be the shrunken hostage rehearsing your own failure. You will close your eyes, feel this vast new space of inner peace, and smile, knowing the key to the vault is in your hands. Your frequency has changed, and in the next hours, the external world will have no choice but to reorganize itself to reflect your new identity. What makes this moment different is not motivation. It's not a temporary surge of confidence or a passing insight. It's the point where you've seen through the mechanism clearly enough that you can't fully go back to the old way of reacting. The illusion may still try to appear. It may bring the same sensations, the same familiar signals, but something is no longer the same. There is a recognition now, a quiet awareness that says, I know what this is, and that changes your response before you even act. Where there used to be automatic tension, there is now a pause, not forced, not practiced, just present. A fraction of a second where you don't immediately believe the signal. That small gap is the ignition point. Because in that gap you are no longer inside the pattern, you are seeing it, and once something is seen clearly, it loses its ability to control you in the same way. You might still feel the pull, but it doesn't define your next move. It doesn't dictate your behavior with the same authority. This is what makes it irreversible. Not because the feeling disappears forever, but because your relationship with it has changed at the root. You are no longer trying to win against it or escape from it. You are recognizing it as it arises. And recognition is power. It's simple, but it has depth. When you recognize the illusion in real time, it cannot fully solidify. It cannot build the same momentum. It cannot trap you in the same loop, because you are no longer feeding it with unconscious reaction. You might notice this in the quiet moments first, lying in bed like now, where your mind would usually start projecting worst-case scenarios, but instead of being pulled into them, you see them forming. You notice the beginning of the story rather than getting lost in the middle of it, and that changes the entire experience. The body stays more relaxed, the breath remains steady, the thoughts come and go without taking over. It's not that nothing appears, it's that nothing sticks in the same way. This is how a new baseline is formed, not through effort, but through repetition of awareness. Each time you see the pattern and don't follow it automatically, you reinforce a different pathway, one that is grounded, clear, and stable. And over time, that becomes your default. The illusion loses its urgency. It stops feeling like an emergency and starts looking like a signal passing through. Something temporary, something observable, something that doesn't require immediate action. This gives you a different kind of confidence, not the loud, forced kind that tries to overpower doubt, but a quiet certainty that you can handle what arises, that you don't need to prepare for every possible outcome in advance, that you can meet situations as they come with presence instead of projection. And from that place, your actions begin to shift. You stop delaying things that matter. You stop overthinking every step. You move when it's time to move, and you rest when it's time to rest. There is less internal argument, less back and forth. This creates consistency. And consistency builds momentum in a way that force never could. Because now your energy is not scattered across resistance and reaction. It is directed, available, and steady. Even when challenges appear, they don't carry the same weight. You don't interpret them as signs that something is wrong. You see them as part of movement, part of growth, part of reality unfolding. The illusion once turned every obstacle into proof that you should stop. Now those same moments become points of engagement. You respond instead of retreat. And this is where something deeper settles in. A sense that you are no longer at the mercy of your internal patterns, that you are not being pulled back every time you try to move forward. There is stability here, not because life is controlled, but because your center is no longer easily shaken. You know how to return to it. You know how to recognize when something is pulling you away, and that knowing stays with you. It doesn't depend on the situation. It doesn't disappear under pressure. It becomes part of how you experience everything moving forward, which means what happens next is no longer about escaping fear. It's about living without being governed by it. Darkness never had power of its own. It was only a sketch begging for the energy of your attention to exist. But the dark illusion of fear vanishes tonight. The mirage collapsed because you chose to turn on the light of observation and refuse to keep fighting. Reclaim now your rightful throne as the sole architect of your universe, because from this moment on, absolutely nothing can stop you. What once felt heavy is now clear. What once controlled you is now seen. And once you see it, the illusion cannot rebuild the same way again. This is your new ground, calm, aware, and steady. If you made it this far, write in the comments, "I see clearly now." That simple act marks your shift. And if this spoke to you, watch one of the videos on your screen now. If you want to go deeper and support the channel, consider becoming a member. Exclusive content is coming soon.